500 years ago, Martin Luther led a movement, the Protestant Reformation, which resulted in the split away from the dominant institution, the Catholic Church. And today we have 560 million Protestants. Now, how is that related to carbon offsets and climate change? Well, that's what I'm gonna show you in this video. Because I see parallels between what happened then, 500 years ago, with Martin Luther and Protestant Reformation, especially the practice of selling salvation on the market and buying your way out of hell, right? Pricing sin and trading sin on the market, right? That practice that preceded the Protestant Reformation. I see parallels between that and what we're doing today in the context of climate change. We have these market instruments such as carbon offsets, carbon credits, and we have also devised this market mechanism for trading, for buying environmental salvation, right? We're trying to purge ourselves of our environmental sins, release of greenhouse gas emissions, so that we avoid hell. Hell is planet that is too hot, global warming, and that warming is caused by the release of greenhouse gas emissions. Hi, I'm Jan from sustainablebutterflies.com.au, and on the screen you see my 5 pillars of sustainability. Now, what was the Protestant Reformation about, right? In general, and as you know a lot of these things because this is common knowledge, I'm just gonna give you a summary here. In general, it was a movement, a protest, as the name suggests, against the practices of the Catholic Church, and we're talking 14th, 15th, and early 16th century. Now, these Christian reformers, starting with John Wycliffe, then Jan Hus, and then Martin Luther, what they were protesting against was the church that they saw is moving away from the Christian foundations, Christian basics, right? The Bible, the life of Jesus, and the principles of modesty and purity and chastity and leanness and sort of purity and poverty, right? This pious life. They saw that the church is moving away from it, and the church that created all this apparatus of clerics and bishops and archbishops and vicars and prelates and the Pope especially at the top, seated in the Rome, and the church that kind of divorced itself from these basics and that put too much emphasis on the things that it declared are the holy and divine, right? Because the Pope was kind of like God's emissary on earth, right? And the Christian reformers didn't like this, right? Because they wanted to go back to Bible and back to these principles. Now, I'm sure I missed a lot of these things, but that was the general picture. However, in particular, there was one thing that these Christian reformers just hated more than anything else, right? It was like a red flag for them. It was point of no return. It was a no-go zone for them. And that was the practice of the sale and trade of religious indulgences. So what were the religious indulgences? The religious indulgences were Pope-endorsed or stamped coupons or tickets, something like this, that were sold by the clerics to the believers, right? And back then in Middle Ages, everybody was believer. They were sold to you with the promise to cleanse you of or purify, purge you of your sins, right? So you could buy this from them, and the promise was that if you buy this indulgence, your time in the purgatory, which was another concept created by the church, would be shortened, right? And with some premium indulgences, you could even skip the purgatory altogether, right? Now, essentially, it was a market tool that allowed you to buy your way out of hell, and that sold you salvation, right? Now, initially, these indulgences weren't the main dish on the menu. They were kind of like a side dish on the menu, along with what else constitutes to be a good Christian, such as going to Mass and performing good deeds, good works, right? Confessing to the priest and, going on a pilgrimage, etc., right? These are the things as well. And then they introduce, yes, there is also this new thing, religious indulgences. So that was in the beginning, and in the beginning they were actually used for charitable purposes, such as building hospices, sanatoriums, or soup kitchens for the poor, right? But over time, this trade boom, because people couldn't read, they trusted whatever the priest said. Again, the priest was something like a mini god in the village, and the Pope was like the mini god for the whole Christian world back then, right? Anyway, so this market boomed because people were buying these indulgences. They were fearing hell. Obviously, they wanted salvation, and soon it corrupted the whole church, because instead of it being just one thing on the menu, it became the main dish. And this trade boom, it corrupted the church, and then they started building opulent palaces and fornicating and hosting feasts and, gathering more and more robes and living this opulent life. And that sort of malpractice that was allowed by this dominance, over-reliance on this market tool, which got totally corrupt. And that was the main thing for the Christian reformers that they absolutely hated. It was non-negotiable for them. And this trade, this practice of religious indulgences actually triggered the Protestant Reformation. How do I know that? Well, this is actually not my opinion. Because when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses, which was the document that triggered the Protestant Reformation, when he nailed that two-page document, his 95 objections to the practices of Catholic Church, to the door of the church in Wittenberg, I think it was in 1517, but it doesn't matter the exact date. When he did that, that document mentions the word indulgence 45 times. And that just shows you how big this was a deal for Martin Luther and his predecessors, Jan Hus and John Wycliffe. I'm not saying that religious indulgences caused the Reformation. No, the situation was way more complex. But what I am saying is that they triggered the Reformation. It was kind of like a spark that sort of sparked this chain reaction of events. Now, 500 years fast forward, right, to today, early 21st century. How is that related? Where is the connection between what happened then with Martin Luther and Protestant Reformation and today carbon credits, carbon offsets, climate change? Okay, here is the connection. Today we are also over-relying on market instruments that we have devised in order to sort of avoid hell and buy salvation. What do I mean? I mean this. What is the modern version of hell? It is not the superstitious and religious hell of Middle Ages. No. It is science-based hell, which is climate change, climate changed and challenged planet, right? Global warming. Planet that is too hot, that it disrupts the natural patterns, climate patterns and ecosystem, and which makes life unsuitable for humans and animals moving forward, right? Based on the projections, right? So that is the idea of hell, modern hell. What is the current sin? The main sin is the release of greenhouse gas emissions, right? That is our modern sin. How do we purge ourselves of this sin, these greenhouse gas emissions? Well, initially we had the tools of, we reduce the emissions and we will find alternatives, and some of that is happening, but we have created this market instrument, such as carbon offsets and carbon credits, which we are now trading and which initially were used also as a sort of small dish on a menu, right, that you can do when you have residual emissions, or if you can't get rid of your emissions, you can offset, but it should be only in like a last resort kind of thing. That was the original concept, but now this market instrument took over, and now for many companies and countries even, it is a go-to option. And that means that they no longer, and we have concepts of net zero and carbon neutral, right? And these concepts don't require you to reduce your emissions to be net zero and carbon neutral. You don't have to reduce your emissions at all, and you can even keep increasing your emissions and you will still be carbon neutral and net zero. And we have obscenities such as carbon neutral certified petrol and diesel. Conventional petrol and diesel, not some biofuel, no, conventional petrol and diesel, as I shown you in the previous video. So what I'm seeing is this initial sort of naive and well-intentioned introduction of this market instrument into something that is really beyond our grasp, such as climate, nature, right? And for medieval people it was heaven and hell, right? They tried to trade with sin and create market for it, right? And it totally backfired. And you know, Protestant Reformation is a good case study, historical case study. What happens when you rely on market instruments, when you meddling with these otherworldly things, right? Through market solely, right? And that's, for me, that's a lesson, because today we are making the same mistake. We are over-relying on market instruments for meddling with climates, nature and healthy planet, right? And it's getting corrupt, just as the Catholic Church got corrupted to the point where this movement of Protestant Reformation emerged. Now finally, let me share what I consider be the biggest challenge, question and difference between these two situations, these two contexts, Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation and religious indulgences, and today, climate change, carbon offsets and carbon credits, right? It's not that back then it was about hell and religion and a Catholic Church and God and superstition. No, and today we are science-based and it's about climate change and carbon offsets and it's all like rational. No, that's not the biggest challenge, difference and question, because that's obvious. The biggest challenge, difference and question is this, in my opinion. Back then, when Martin Luther, John Wycliffe and Jan Hus were protesting against church, they had a relatively simple argument. I'm not saying that their job was easy, it wasn't, and some of them paid, right, actually got killed by the church for protesting. Right? But so they were brave men and it wasn't easy, but their argument was simple. They looked at the Bible and pointed out unscriptural practices carried out by the Catholic Church. They said, religious indulgences, Catholic Church, where is that in the Bible? I don't see that in the life of Jesus. What are you doing? You are corrupt. And I've got proof. I've got this one universally recognized document, the scripture, right? And that's how they structured the Protestant Reformation. So it was a relatively simple argument, right? Now, today though, we don't have one universally accepted, universally venerated, worshipped and recognized document, something like a green gospel or something, where we could go to and point out sort of unscriptural green practices, such as, oh, you know, you shouldn't have carbon neutral certified fossil fuels, right? You shouldn't have, you shouldn't over-rely on carbon offsets, right? Well, yes, you have voices that are saying it, but there are a million other ways that the company can structure the argument for these offsets, because they say, well, we also decarbonize, etc., etc., etc. We rely on unproven technology, blah, 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 blah. Today's context and this context is far more fragmented. There are too many frameworks, too many options, too many books to go to, right? It's very, very kind of much more messy. It's much messier situation than what they had 500 years ago, right? But the principles and the pathologies of these two movements are similar, and that's what I wanted to share with you. Thanks very much for your time. I don't have solutions, but I think that we can learn from this historical case study and apply at least some insights into the modern context when dealing with climate change and sustainability. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. Bye.